Hello, everybody. I'm Joe McGovern, awards reporter here at TheWrap, and we are happy to have you here for our 2021 awards screening of the Oscar entry from Canada, Drunken Birds, with director and writer Ivan Grbovic and cinematographer and writer Sara Mishara. So we're going to show you the trailer for the film first, and then we'll go right into a conversation with our two panelists. And to our audience, please take part in the live chat of the stream and share your thoughts about the film and let us know where you all are tuning in from. So now let's take a look at the trailer for Drunken Birds.
Bienvenidos.
Content de te voir.
Igualmente, gusto verlo.
Hola.
C'est Julie, mon épouse.
Comer la patrona.
Estelle.
Merci.
Antonio, señor.
Jesús. Willy.
Vous allez travailler sur une des plus vieilles fermes de la région. Ça fait 4 générations. C'est le grand-père de Julie qui a bâti la grange en arrière là-bas. Ici, on commence à 5h30 à tous les jours. Si vous n'êtes pas là, vous manquez une journée de paye.
¿Y los jefes?
Nada más acuérdate por qué estás aquí y ya verás que todo va a estar bien.
Aquí tengo dos personalidades. La del tipo que todos conocen en el pueblo y la del que te está hablando en este momento.
Merci beaucoup.
Tu commences à apprendre le français?
Tabarnak.
¿Y a ti? ¿Quién te espera?
Ya van 4 años.
Se llama Mar.
Welcome back. It is my pleasure to introduce Ivan Grbovic and Sara Mishara. Hello.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on the film and on the selection. It's a wonderful film. It's a fascinating film to talk about. But before we talk about the film, I'd like to just talk about the two of you as collaborators, because it's something we don't often see, although I'm surprised we don't see it more, actually, where a cinematographer who in a lot of cases do take part in the creation, if you will, of the ideas of the film is actually credited as a co-screenwriter. So perhaps, Sara, can you begin maybe by just giving us a little background on you and your career and your involvement with Ivan?
Yes. Well, Ivan and I met at AFI as friends, and we collaborated on a lot of projects, from short films to music videos. He was my gaffer. We basically sort of grew up in the cinema together, watching all the reference movies that informed who we became as filmmakers. And we've often, shot back and forth ideas. So his first film, Romeo 11, I ended up co-screenwriting with him because I think his cinema is very visual, and this is where like the visual storytelling and the actual story kind of come together. So I come in as a writer and develop, I guess, visual ideas and ways of telling the story in different scenes, and then we sort of throw the ball back and forth together until we come up with the final script.
And Ivan, tell us about your background as a filmmaker, and maybe you can, in telling us about that, you can perhaps lead us into talk about this film. What maybe what in your background led you to the interest in this subject?
As Sarah mentioned, we both went to AFI together.
Yeah.
In the cinematography program. So I started off as a cinematographer and then slowly realized that the best images I made were my own, hence me kind of veering into directing. After that, yeah, music videos, commercials. And then I remember 15 years ago, after a short film, driving back to Montreal and kind of getting lost in the fog in a small town and just seeing these foreign workers in the fog and being like, what is going on? I kind of thought I was in a Twilight Zone for a moment there, and no, it wasn't. It's just that my first encounter with seasonal workers in Canada, and I think that first impression was the foundation for any conversation that Sarah and I had, henceforth about the script, and that kind of was the beginning of it all.
So that's where it started. I mean, because the film can be described in so many different ways. It's an immigrant story. It's a love story. It's a unrequited love story. I mean, it's about the unknowability of all of our futures, the paths we take, or the paths that we're pushed. But was that it? Was it the plight of the seasonal workers? Was that the sort of the first of what I guess were many conversations that you had about the plot?
Yeah, it was just kind of the absurdity of the image, kind of like just how anything's possible, and how sometimes if you look at a movie like Babel, like we try to make sense of it. You know, you try to make kind of, oh my God, it's a picture at the end that makes all this. Here we try to just kind of express this kind of, at the same time, chaotic, absurdist kind of vision of contemporary society, and also its beauty. And kind of Sarah and I obviously very kind of intrigued by images, and that's what we tried to develop.
Of course.
And I would add that I guess the idea of the other, us being both somewhat immigrants in Canada, our second generation, we've always been very interested in how, different cultures kind of integrate themselves or don't and mutate into a new culture. And in terms of the love story, I think that seasonal workers are some of the most romantic figures you can possibly imagine. They leave these, men have huge, hard, long hours, for 6 to 8 months, leaving their families and loved ones behind. And there's something quite iconic and heroic about the sort of their existence. And that was very inspiring to us.
Yeah. There are, I'm sure in the writing process, a lot of different ways you could go with this. And the one that you ultimately chose was to create sort of a puzzle film where even the very first scene that the long shot that I guess we could talk to Sara about in an apartment. We don't know what city we're in. I guess it's Montreal. The camera goes out the window. We see a man getting out of a car on a rainy street. This is something that will be echoed much later. This is a scene that we'll see again. But what was it like to, I guess, devise the story you wanted to tell and then take scissors and just sort of cut it up to tell it a little bit differently for the audience?
I mean, the first iteration of the script was just from the point of view of one of the farmer's daughter. So that was so the script began 10 years ago, and every time we came back to the script, we just add a layer. And it became kind of, at the beginning, there was no love story between kind of the mother character and Willie, the hero. And just every time we came back to it, because, she was doing features and I was kind of developing other things as well. And we came back to it, and it became this kind of archaeological kind of layers of kind of story. And I think it just, I read Jennifer Egan's welcome, a visit from the Goon Squad.
Yeah.
That really kind of, I remember being kind of in Cape Cod reading it and being it was very, I felt a lot of freedom reading that book. And there was a bit of Pulp Fiction in there as well. I know Jennifer Egan was inspired by Pulp Fiction, and reading kind of a visit from the Goon Squad, there was a bit this kind of, cut, go to another character, cut, you know what, we're following a dollar bill, cut. It's like, I like that kind of, and I think Sarah and I are watching a lot of TV, and this kind of one, like 3-act kind of, a bit, there's a pressure to be very kind of just perfect narratively nowadays, I guess. And we were just trying to free ourselves from that a bit. I think, I don't know if you agree, Sarah.
Yeah, and I also think that the type of cinema that's always inspired us is one where, as a spectator, you're actively involved and sort of working and, developing your own narratives as the story goes along. I think of, many different films, but, one of the films that I've always really loved is Magnolia, because, you have many different characters and there's, there's absurdity, there's beauty, there's humor, there's sort of, a little bit of everything all, mixed together. And I like that as a spectator, you can be caught off guard, and that, all the pieces of the puzzle don't necessarily fit perfectly together. And I think that that's an exciting type of cinema to watch. And so we were trying also to create a rhythm where the spectator is sort of constantly, engaged in trying to put together their own feelings about what's going on the screen.
Yeah. Oh, and I love both of those reference points, Magnolia and Goon Squad. Goon Squad, which has proved to be difficult to adapt. I think it's been attempted once or twice, either as a film or as a TV series, but it's a very challenging format to tell a story. So how much did you grapple with that, with, in the script stage, letting the audience know enough, but still preserving that great feeling of being slightly dislocated in the narrative?
I think the only sequence it's hard to kind of, at the writing phase, that was hard for people was the Chinese sequence. The China sequence, it's kind of like just cuts the movie in two. Otherwise, it kind of read really well because when you're kind of driven by a love story, you kind of generally carry people with you, and it kind of goes longer than another type of story. So obviously that kind of was the kind of propelled all the narratives, but I don't think it was, I think it watches much differently than it read. It watches more the way you think it read than how it read, which felt a bit more commercial when you read it. I think, I don't know, Sarah, like, I don't think I don't want to debate the commercial kind of value of this movie at all, but it's turned a bit more into a mysterious movie to kind of, and those who believe in the movie, a bit like Birth, Birth, the Jonathan Glazer movie, those who believe that a kid can be reborn love the movie. Those who don't believe that hate the movie. And I think there's a part of this movie where Sarah and I are asking people, just sit down and just believe. Just instead of just questioning what just enter the movie, And I think that's something that we both talked about in the script phase, was kind of, okay, are we going too far? Maybe, let's do it, right? There's a lot of that going on, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right, Sarah?
Yeah, no, and also, like, I think that when you have many characters, there's a lot of finessing of, our characters are not necessarily all perfectly likable. And that's challenging when you're asking, an audience to follow different characters, because there's a risk that you may not be rooting for someone in a way, especially if they're not perfect, or if they do things that are bothersome. And obviously, our characters, we tried to create characters that are all imperfect, but that are all ultimately looking, chasing a rainbow in their lives in one way or another. They all have, the main character has his Marlena, his true love, but that kind of represents that thing that everyone is striving for in their lives, what keeps us going. We all have something that keeps us going. And we kept going back to that with each character, I think, to make sure that, that they were multidimensional, and that we were not necessarily, trying to make one better than all the others, but that they all had that same common sort of, searching for something, searching for their horizon in their lives.
Yes. There's a wonderful, there's many wonderful things that reappear in the movie. One that I loved is there's a very kitsch sort of painting of a man who I think is a drug dealer with his shirt off, laying kind of on his side, holding a gun. And we see it, I think, 3 times in very different contexts each time. It's fascinating because each time we see it, the painting in a way changes our perspective of what else we're watching. But I wanted to bring that up by asking about the locations that you shot in, which is a way we can perhaps talk about the production itself. This is there's a pretty wide range of locales here. Can you maybe discuss perhaps where you thought, how ambitious were you writing the film, knowing that you were going to have to do this in a sort of international way? Mexico, Canada, China.
With COVID breaking, obviously.
Yeah, we talk about that as well, please.
I think we were, when we wrote, I don't think we were really I think we have very kind of ambitious producers with us, so they don't shackle us when we write. Obviously, at one point they're like, "Oh, wait a minute, this is a bit too much," or this F1 in the middle of the street, how's that going to work? Stuff like that. But I think we just wrote it in, like I remember seeing I have all these references that kind of come out while I talk, like Miss Bala. Like I remember seeing Miss Bala and being kind of inspired by that whole universe. And I think we just wrote a castle. We wrote a castle in Mexico, a mansion. We assumed that would be easy to find, but it happened to not be very easy to find. And then we kind of wanted Quebec to be idyllic, beautiful, bucolic kind of sunset a la Days of Heaven kind of situation. So that was kind of easier to find, I think. And then there was China, which we were supposed to go to China. We had our visas. We were about to leave, and then the world changed, and then we decided to do that on location in Montreal. And our set designer, Andréline Beauparlant, she recreated kind of that workshop that we needed, which kind of ended up being better because we had more control than just. I can imagine myself and Sara being in the middle of nowhere in China and having our time. But so that was kind of maybe lucky on our end. But ultimately, we did 37 days of shooting, and I don't know if I can kind of veer into the kind of more like, but most of it, I think 4/5 were shot in Montreal, in the whereabouts, and then we shot 5-6 days in Mexico. Then we did some reshoots because we couldn't go to China, basically.
And Mexico has a really rich sort of film industry and a lot of wonderfully talented people. So when you go there, there's a lot. It's a very kind of giving place for shooting, and it's kind of incredible too when you write scenes, and such as the case of this mansion. It turned out that these things actually existed, and I think we're very ambitious, and the world that we construct is very controlled. It's not there's nothing documented, but then we try to ride that fine line of it also somehow being believable, in our filmic universe. And when we went to Mexico, we worked with, incredible people there, and we were really able to sort of squeeze the most out of our 5 days of shooting there.
But we couldn't find that mansion originally. And at one point, our extras casting person, she was overhearing a conversation. I had all these just kind of colonialist kind of style, kind of very Baroque type places. And then she's like, "You're looking for a mansion? I just shot a kind of a telenovela at this guy's crazy place. You got to go see it." And we went to see it. And this guy had 2 tigers, 1 black panther, a horde of kind of bisons, 100 wolves. And he was a painter, Renaissance man, piano, hell knows what else. And a lot of people ask me the question about this opening sequence. And there was a carousel, yes, inside the mansion.
And so the tiger was a happy accident. It was the
yes. There's 2 tigers. I didn't want to go to.
You showed one.
Yes. I had shot one. Ultimately, it was a happy accident, and it was confirmed. Sometimes people read the script and you're worried that you're going a bit too far in your depiction of a foreign kind of culture. And I think nowadays you have to be very careful in how you kind of depict foreign cultures or cultures that's not yours. And there you go. You got 2 tigers, a black panther, supposedly a kind of
and he had hundreds of paintings of himself
naked,
which is
Baroque. I mean, it was like, millions more than what we had actually already.
Our painting was feeble in
Yeah.
comparison. He had like gorgeous triptychs of himself with kind of, I find it was really like very poetic and beautiful, and he had his own brand of tequila. We could go on, like arguing a documentary on this person would be more interesting. He's a controversial figure, but nonetheless, he was very nice to us and kind of let us do practically everything we wanted.
And we have our own Tiger King here in the U.S. So
yes.
Why not one in Mexico too? The film has been described in a very positive way as magical realist, and I think that sequence. I'm going to ask Sara a lot about this, about filming that sequence, because there is something very dreamlike about it. Apart from the bizarreness of this world we're in this mansion that's been sort of desiccated and sort of seems like it's been bombed out. What was your approach to filming it, but also to try to find the right balance? So it's because you are depicting something in the context of the movie that is real.
Yep.
However, there's lots of real stealth camera work, a lot of gliding around. What were the thought processes like that for that?
Well, yeah, the beginning of the film, I mean, the main character, Willie, is I guess, to us, he was sort of this iconic hero who has had an extraordinary life, despite being a very humble, person, a poor seasonal worker, but who worked for this drug lord. And so when we enter this mansion, I mean, we're shooting on 35. We had a Steadicam operator. We wanted, the spaces were huge. We had a lot of story to tell in a short amount of time. So it was very important to figure out how to move through these spaces, and sort of each time keep adding a piece of the story. There's a letter. There's people who are sort of taking all the stuff out of the place. Then we enter into a sort of a flashback sequence in the car. So there was this fluid movements with a Steadicam, shooting film. I didn't have a lot of light there, so we would sort of fill it up with smoke and kind of just let the natural light, sit in that smoke, and let the area we took out a lot of stuff out and, made it look a little bit more deserted, and basically tried to do, take each shot kind of takes you to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next in that sequence. And that's basically what we did there.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask as well, Yvonne mentioned Days of Heaven a few minutes ago, and there's beautiful, what we call golden time in this film. Is that something that still is that as rudimentary as it was back when Terrence Malick made Days of Heaven, or are there lenses and filters and ways to sort of cheat, or is it really, you got to get that, it's a window of time, right? It's about a half hour.
Yeah, 45 minutes, I would say. Yeah. Well, yeah, we were any cinematography student is inspired by Days of Heaven, and we all have that dream of, in the same way that everyone wants to make The Godfather, everyone also wants to make Days of Heaven. It's kind of a thing that you want as a cinematographer. But in this case, we wanted to represent, people who work in the field. They get up at sunrise, they come home at sundown. And so we had as a rule that we were going to stick to that. And what that means is, rehearsing in the afternoon, setting up 2 dolly tracks, rehearsing with the actors, doing full rehearsals up until the moment that we shoot. And then we had 45 minutes to shoot all of our shots, basically. And, and we had long hours of waiting. We really had a very sort of traditional old school approach to that. There's no lenses or filters that I know of, but I think you can't recreate that. You really have to capture that moment. So we structured our shoot schedule around that. And our producers were, you need producers that are really on board, and Luc and Kim, our producers, are incredible for that. They really, allowed us to do that, because you don't allow a film crew to just sit and wait for hours at a time anymore on sets. But that's what they did for Days of Heaven. They would shoot at sun up, sundown. So we really did have that approach, and would do some interiors during the day. and that's how you catch it. And there's something very exciting. The camera's rolling and it's film, and you only have a certain amount of time. And I guess all the actors also get, like, their senses get kind of heightened during that moment. And there's something quite magical that happens, I think, when you have such a short amount of time to capture it. So that was a really exciting part of the shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 37 days is remarkable to have pulled this all off, and especially given. So, Yvonne, this was after COVID had broken out.
Before.
It was before.
Before. But we were scheduled to shoot the last part of the film, and then, yes, COVID broke.
Tell us about shooting on film. What that means to you, Yvonne.
I don't know. For me, I feel it kind of balances out a film set. If everybody, I don't know, I just don't like seeing the image. I don't like. I like the magic of it. I like seeing rushes the day after. I like kind of trusting my DP. I like kind of, I know it's going to be beautiful. If I had a doubt, I would frame close-ups, because sometimes you want to see better. And I like the tradition of it. I grew up on film, so did Sara, and it was kind of for perf anamorphic. It just felt, and everybody's more focused. If it's film is rolling, especially on a indie film, people are more, more careful, and I don't know. There's an attention to detail and I love the fleeting quality of it, and kind of I don't know. Why not? Film is the best.
Yeah. No, and it's amazing because all the things you're just saying are about sort of the production, and for us in the audience, it's just the richness and the grain and the light. I mean, I know that there's digital now that can mimic a lot of this stuff, almost, to our layman naked eye or whatever. But it's different. I mean, it just is simply different.
Yeah, I'm a very kind of attention-oriented person, and it kind of frees me. Having that extra layer of just unknown frees me and makes me a bit more adventurous, a bit more intuitive. If I saw exactly how the flare worked, maybe I would have a comment. Here I don't. I just trust the process.
Yeah.
And on a film like this, it's kind of good.
Did you want to, since as a cinematographer, Sara, did you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I'm shooting a film right now on film, and I just got my dailies. I have to be honest. I just think also, I have to say, I think digital has so many qualities, and there are so many beautiful films shot on digital. But if you're going to just ask me what I prefer, shooting film is just so much more beautiful to me. It takes a lot of trust from everyone, from all departments, because obviously you're seeing a reproduction of what you're shooting rather than the actual thing. But as Yvonne said, I think that it forces us to take more risks in many departments. Like all of us, we're not watching playbacks. We're not color timing on set. We're not, the director's not, commenting on lighting. It's like we decide on the look beforehand. We look at references, and then when we're on set, everyone is sort of very focused on their own, contribution, and then it all comes together in the rushes. And I feel that on a whole, we end up pushing a little bit further, and maybe also, as he was saying, trusting the process, trusting that we got the good take, rather than doing 40 takes. At a certain point, you kind of know you got it, you feel you got it, and you trust your instinct. And I think that for me, it ends up making sort of more finessed images. Yeah.
Can we spend a few minutes talking about the cast and the actors? This remarkable young man who we all saw in Roma, and I guess that's probably how he got put on your radar to play Willie. I'm asking what the first meetings with him were like. Did you audition a lot of actors for the lead? And what really stood out in your first meetings with him and during those initial times?
Well, Pimienta Films in Mexico helped us produce the Mexican side of things and casting. So we had the casting director from Roma doing the casting for us. I thought of Jorge before, but we didn't write the script with anybody in mind, so we auditioned a couple of Willie candidates. I think there was 10 or 12, like around 10. But he quickly stood out, just because he's not kind of classically trained, and he has a bit of a kind of raw quality, and I think he was a bit of a like poet / street performer. He's very physical. I like very physical actors, and it's like strangely enough, most of these people didn't know about seasonal workers. They had no clue. You know, they know, but they don't know. It's not like it's not kind of front page news there. So when I talked to kind of Jorge about, you know, I gave him a documentary, and he's extremely moved, like to tears even, watching. I showed him a documentary called El Contrado by Min Suk Lee, which is a National Film Board Canadian documentary, which is kind of shows a bit the life of seasonal workers in Ontario, in Canada. And he was taken aback by the stories of kind of a man like seeing his child's like kind of 16th birthday on a payphone, or another knowing that he just got kind of, anyways, his dad just died. So he just kind of really, we talked a lot, and then he became the character. Obviously, every time he cast, he brings a lot. He brought a lot. To the table. He's a very lyrical, poetic person, and obviously that kind of shows in the way the movie transpired. But yeah, so that's the way we did it. And we did two callbacks, and then I kind of knew from the beginning it was him. So yeah.
Well, it gives him a chance. I mean, he's very good in Roma, but here we see a lot more of his lightness and his humanity. You know, he's kind of playing the bad boyfriend.
It's
in that film.
Yeah, it can kind of, that could not have been good for his career. You know, it's kind of like,
you know,
it's like yes, you know. But yeah, he's great. He's great. And I think he's gotten a lot of roles because he's so energetic. He has many ways of he can tell it with his body, with his words. He studies a lot as well. He's not just the kind of person who wings it. He just actually knows the script. He questions. Like there's a scene in the movie during the rain when he's about to maybe be executed by the farmer, where he was like, we stopped, and he's like, I don't believe I wouldn't fight this man, you know, and we had a conversation. So he's very invested, and for a person like me who makes a movie every 10 years, to have invested actors like that, just actually questioning the source material, like the material, it's great.
Yeah, and also, I mean, not only him, but other actors. I want to mention Helene as well. You know, not a lot of dialogue in order to express their backstory or their motivation. So much of it done through just these small molecular changes in their faces as we're watching them. Tell us about her.
She was the first one I cast.
Was she?
Yeah, she was the first. We needed to know who she was to kind of understand the color of the movie. And she's like, I knew it was going to be the hardest one to cast because kind of Sara and I know the actor landscape in Quebec. And we want someone opaque, someone we ourselves didn't understand. So to kind of, the closer we got to her, the more we kind of understand the micro changes. What does it mean when she's practicing Spanish? Does it mean that she's dreaming of something? Does she mean that she's leaving somewhere? It's like all these things and she kind of hides a lot. And so we cast her first. And again, it was a bit of Sara was the one who you know, we live together, by the way, just kind of as well. So
we're married.
Yeah, married. So you come back from casting, you show she obviously has, you know, kind of not only kind of writing kind of credit, but also she sees the face, she's inspired. So she tells me, so Hélène was the first one to be cast. Then it was Jorge for Willie. And then it was the farmer himself, and he's kind of a relative heavyweight in Quebec. So he kind of was fun to have him on board. And then the daughter who again was just an obvious choice.
Very complex role that she has to pull off in that performance as well, because we see, you know, with all the performances, but we just keep seeing the layers. You have to believe.
Yeah, you have to believe. You have to believe. If you don't believe, you just don't make it to the end. And you know, like that. That's why I keep like, it's like there's something about her character. Without her character, the ending doesn't happen. So she has to kind of. I always say they're dormant characters that suddenly have their moment. Almost like you're waiting backstage, and then it's my turn to kind of to carry the movie. She carries the movie. I think 2/3 in, and she has to bring us to the last act, basically.
Yeah.
So that's where she has to be intriguing enough so that we care about that little kind of sequence.
Also, one of my favorite moments, it's so unexpected, is in the early morning hours. We see looks like a NASCAR vehicle that pulls up in downtown Montreal, and her and the driver acknowledge each other and both laugh. Tell us about including that moment in the film, and was it based on something that you had heard really happened?
I think Montreal has obviously the movie is about exploitation.
Yeah.
Montreal has a F1 Grand Prix race every year that not only attracts 1 million tourists to the city, but also a kind of sex trade. It kind of so there's obviously kind of a bit of insight to that aspect of the race coming to Montreal. But ultimately, I think Sara and I thought that maybe we need to add magic not only to Willie's story but to our local characters as well, and just that kind of that anything can happen. And when you're young, I think I speak for myself, but when I was 17 or 18, I thought anything could happen to me, and I don't know if you had any that's what we were trying to express. And these two people who kind of don't know what they're doing, but ultimately kind of just kind of live a little short moment. And it's also not negative. You think he could be kind of drugged out of his mind and just kind of going to kill himself, but no. Ultimately, Sara and I always think there's a kind of sun behind those clouds, and that's something we kind of every time we were writing a scene is like, how can this not become a 90s French film where at the end somebody gets knifed to death? That's every time we're like, okay, Catherine Breillat, what would she do? Let's do the opposite. You know what I mean? So that's something that we kind of thought about. Obviously, our influences speak a lot. Leo Carax, Bad Blood. Bad Blood, Mauvais Sang, like that. That there's these kind of scenes that are purely visual. And again, if you're in the situation and you believe, then is it for real? Is it not? Is it actually happening? People sometimes after the movie, they're like, did it really happen? And did it and I asked, and most likely it happened, but if you don't believe it happened, it's all right. You know what I mean? So sometimes when we want to know all the answers, you kind of forget the cinema aspect of going to the movies.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're always trying to figure out stuff, it's not just about figuring out stuff. It's about just living a 25 by 60 foot image and just being embraced by just tons of craft and imagination, So I hope that kind of answers a bit of that question.
It does, and yes, I even think of the one more reference perhaps is the sort of Federico Fellini quality of having the horse appear in the middle.
Did he really ride the horse? Did he really ride a horse for 60 kilometers? No, maybe yes, but it's like we want like these images to kind of it's mythical. It's a fantasy. It's why does a movie about like seasonal workers have to be a documentary style, handheld? Anyways, I obviously have I've thought about this a lot, hence the movie. But I think that's where we're coming from. These kind of iconic images and just raise it like he's a prince. For me, Willie is a prince. He's looking, he's a prince, and why can't he be a prince?
Yeah.
And his happy ending maybe also shows us that in general there's no happy ending in these situations. And it's such an improbable happy ending that maybe we should kind of think about whether it's even possible.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, and we show it to people, and some in some circles, people see it as romantic, but they don't actually see that there's issues to be discussed, obviously, with this movie. And we don't see it as being rosy and everybody being kind of like, no, it's actually my character is a proof that it's a hard world, Yeah. It's an exceptional ending that shows that in normal circumstances, probably that farmer would have, just executed him. Yeah. I hope I'm not just saying too much, but
I don't think so. I mean, I think especially if people who are viewing this will have seen the movie, and especially you know, they're going to want to know, because it is just such a sort of a beautiful puzzle. So just two other questions about the editing process. Did the film that the two of you wrote together become a whole different film in the editing room? I mean, I guess that always happens, but
No, I mean, I think it's you read the script and you'd be surprised how close it is to the script. You know, it's actually, people have told us to change it in the editing room, but we didn't. Like, no, actually, there's, aside from a certain, like a internet sequence, there was only one internet cafe sequence. And somebody said we need to kind of, maybe Willie's quest has to be a bit more like kind of longer. We split that in two, but otherwise we cut one scene from the shoot and did that, but mostly it kind of stayed the same. We kind of trusted the, you know, we trusted the script. It's kind of hard to, and we edited for a long time. Because of COVID, I got 16 months of editing. I tried everything. I tried. If you have a thought, I tried it. I tried bringing the beginning and the ending. I tried everything, and I came back always to where we were. Not because I was insecure, just because it is the movie and the impressions. It's a movie about impressions, and those who need, again, a logical, you know, logical thing. It's not Law and Order. You know,
But it's interesting how, you know, this kind of movie, I think that we're so used now to, you know, writers' rooms and scripts that are, you know, rewritten and finessed, and, you know, having a structure that's so tight. And so when you're doing something disjointed like this, there's always the first instinct is to want to try to reconnect things more sort of seamlessly. And I think that you know, what was interesting in the editing process was to sort of realize that that's not the script that we wrote, and that's not what the film that we shot. And so to try to then, you know, retroactively make it more narratively, I guess, you know, fluid or connected was just, you know, not the film that we made. And so that was an interesting part of the editing process.
The one thing though, is there one thing that we did, like remember the Mr. Salad sequence? And after the Mr. Salad sequence, he says something like, I long to see my wife, the long road, every door, that scene didn't exist. We just kind of, in post-production, like tweaked the lips of the guy and rewrote dialogue a bit, just to kind of have a bit more weight to the ending. Because the ending, people wanted to know why we went back to the beginning, and we need to give a bit more weight to, you know, sometimes all we long for is to go back to where we come from.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I remember, like Kim, the producer, really kind of, when Kim is our kind of emotional, like when she feels something, it means that we're going in the right direction. So, you know, whereas Luc is more of the story kind of, you know, the story rationale kind of producer. So they together, when they watch movies, they kind of give us good cues on those two levels.
That's good. So, and lastly, I'm sure you've been asked this probably a few times since the movie premiered, but can you explain the title? Is it a direct translation from the French, or yes. Are we missing something in the translation?
No, I mean, Drunken, obviously, like Drunken can quickly veer into kind of you know, like just a person kind of getting out of a bar, you know, in downtown Manhattan. But in French, Drunken is a much more kind of poetic term. And Sara, kind of, maybe you can kind of, you're more literary than me. It's like,
I mean, the French obviously have more poetry to their drinking as well, so their terminology. No, les oiseaux ivres is sort of, it means drunken birds, but I think when you say ivre, drunken is a word that can be associated with love as well in French. Kind of drunk on love is you know, or drunk with joy, or, you know, that kind of thing. So in that sense, the idea is the errant quality of the characters in, you know, like drunken birds in the sky. Sometimes when you see it in the film, obviously, but when you see, you know, that almost look like patterns, and they're also like in a large flock, and they're, you know, they're all kind of moving together somehow instinctually. but also veering, right and left. So that kind of frenzied movement, I think, describes the emotion of the characters in some way. But what's really interesting is that the title is actually the first thing that came in this whole script before even the story. It was like kind of like we knew we wanted to make a film called Drunken Birds before we even wrote the script.
That happens.
It's like what not to do in the script writing. Yeah. Yes. Taxi driver. I want to call it, like.
But I guess it's a good way to set the goal, just say here's the end point and let's kind of get to it.
Yes.
And before we go, since we're all living kind of in a Zoom world, I wanted to just, Yvonne, give you a tribute for your bike over there that I see
Thanks a lot.
against the wall. But then, Sara, to ask about the photograph on your wall, I've been looking curious.
I'm in a motel room in Drumheller, Alberta.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm on location.
I know, me too. I was gonna grab it. I need it at home.
I'm just not showing you my messy room, but no, I'm shooting right now, so I happen to be on my day off. So this is my frontier Badlands motel room photo.
Well, yeah, I thought perhaps as we've talked about Terrence Malick's a few times here.
No, I'm fully in that world right now. It's kind of spectacular and fun and shooting film again. So I don't know. I was gonna say, I think too, the film that we made, Yvonne and I love filmmaking and love a certain generation of, films that you see that, I was even watching some old Spielberg films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind the other day, and how ultimately they're very still auteur films, these big budget kind of, large audience movies were very auteur films in the 70s and 80s, I think. And that's the kind of filmmaking that I think we love. And that's why, for instance, we're mentioning Paul Thomas Anderson, who's kind of maintained that level of a mix between something that, you can present to a wider audience, but that remains a very sort of unique perspective and that hasn't been diluted into something very comprehensible. And I think that that's the kind of film that we were trying to make.
It's a great way to finish, because I think that, this is educational for people, this conversation. They can go back through it and pick up the references to Magnolia, go watch that again. Days of Heaven, go read Jennifer Egan's Visit from the Goon Squad, and you'll sort of see where Yvonne and Sara were inspired as well. But also to really kind of pay for us to give our admiration to you for making a really singular, unique, really beautiful film. One that trusts us, the audience, to do a little bit of the work and invest our time, follow closely. I love a movie like this where you have to stay with it from that early scene in the bombed out Mexican mansion with a tiger. You got to figure out, what is all this that I'm watching, and then it's satisfying. There's even we should have talked about it. There's even a black and white sequence, which is wonderful. I'm sure it was exciting to film. Thank you both, and congratulations on the film, the selection. Wishing you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. And it was great to have you here. Be sure to take advantage of our free trial to TheWrap Pro and be the first to know about upcoming Wrap screenings and events. And you can also register for upcoming screenings, catch up on past ones, and everything else by visiting TheWrap.com.